it is probable that what we read in the press, that Trump did have knowledge of what was going on, but did not act thereon. I mean, he is reported to have dismissed it as a hoax. And if you look at the timeline, at the beginning, actually, he was quite respectful or even friendly toward China, praising what China was doing to fight coronavirus in China, etc. And then he flip-flopped. Then he started changing his tune and changing his narrative, blaming China for the pandemic. With Trump, you're dealing with a populist, and he's not an opportunist, and he tries to score political points. I mean, he's hoping to be reelected this year. So in January, February, it was probably politically useful to say what he said, and when it didn't develop the way he had hoped, then he changed his narrative, and then he put the blame not only on China, but he put the blame on the World Health Organization. All I can say is what we need, and we have to take into account that the world has suffered many pandemics. We're not immune, and we could very easily suffer many other types of viruses and bacteria and pandemics in the future. So the only answer is preparedness. That costs money, which means you have to put tax dollars into research and development for preventive measures, research and development in the development of a vaccine, and also treatment. And you also have to be ready with medical equipment in sufficient amounts. It's shocking that in the United States and in many countries, there are not sufficient ventilators. There's no sufficient masks, or no sufficient gloves, or no sufficient testing kits. And once you declare a health emergency of international concern, then Article 44 of the regulations kicks in, and you have to cooperate. That is why I find it particularly obscene that Trump imposes these sanctions, what he calls maximum pressure, on Iran, on Venezuela, on Cuba, on Syria, and so many other countries, when at this stage, what is absolutely essential is solidarity, international solidarity. You must consider, when you don't get medicine in time, you die. It's not just a question of getting the medicine, it's getting the medicine in a timely fashion. So whatever obstacles the United States is putting in the delivery of pandemic medical equipment or testing kits or whatever, it is criminal. And that, by the way, is justiciable. The International Criminal Court is already seized of a case on the illegality of economic sanctions, financial blockades that cause death. As you know, I was the first United Nations rapporteur to go to Venezuela in 21 years. And I carried out very thorough investigations. When I was on the ground, I interviewed everybody from the National Assembly, from the opposition, from the churches, from the non-governmental organizations, civil society, students, professors, etc. and I focused on this issue of sanctions, and I documented how the sanctions led directly to the untimely death of many Venezuelans. After me came Professor Jeffrey Sachs and Mark Weisbrod, who published a report last year in April 2019, estimating the death of some 40,000 Venezuelans as a direct result of the sanctions in the year 2018 alone. So you have to consider now that their sanctions have been actually augmented. It's gotten worse in the course of the year 2019, and it's gotten worse in the course of 2020. And then on top of that, we have the pandemic. So it's quite clear that these sanctions actually amount to a crime against humanity under Article 7 of the Statute of the International Criminal Court. The case is before the court for investigation. It was personally delivered by the Foreign Minister of Venezuela on the 13th of February of this year. And then on the 24th of February of this year, Jorge Arriaza spoke before the Human Rights Council and sought the support of the Human Rights Council and of all human rights activists in getting these sanctions lifted. So the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, the Rapporteur on Sanctions, Leena Doha, the Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Hilal Elber, have all called for the easing, or at least the easing of these sanctions, and at least for the period of the pandemic. So it's clear that there is a consciousness out there that sanctions kill. And it is very unseemly when some extreme right senators in the United States, like Marco Rubio, want more sanctions against Cuba, more sanctions against Venezuela, etc., instead of saying people are dying because of our sanctions, and we had better do something about this.